everybody, and welcome to Carving It Up Live right here on YouTube, as well as on Facebook, Twitch, and on X. I am Bryson Carver. It's great to be with you today. Initially this was going to be, and still to a certain degree will be, a shorter show today, a couple of sports topics, and then reaction to the season finale of Love Story last night. But let's just get right into it. We'll talk about Tom Brady in probably 5 to 10 minutes or so. But let's get into it. We've got some breaking news in the world of sports right now. Is that Tiger Woods, a couple of hours, or I guess 4 hours ago, shortly after 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, was involved in a car accident. He struck a vehicle and rolled his Land Rover. He has been arrested on suspicion of DUI. He showed signs of impairment, according to Martin County Sheriff John Budincic. I hope I'm saying his name correctly. He said that Woods was not injured. He was able to crawl out of the passenger side of his vehicle. He was believed to be impaired by medication and was arrested on suspicion of DUI. Crash occurred after 2 p.m., as we just said. So, listen, first and foremost, and it sounds like based on the reporting that's come out over the last few hours that no serious injuries of any kind. So it sounds like everybody involved is okay. So that's the most important thing. Thank God. The second thing that your mind goes to is, at least mine did initially before I knew that this was a suspicion of DUI. The second thing your mind goes to is, man, Tiger had a torn Achilles last year. We know about his long slew of injuries throughout the course of his career, really kind of stripped his prime from him before it even got a chance to get started. Some of that's on him, some of that's not. But, it's like, okay, is he going to be able to go at the Masters in a few weeks and all that? And then you find out it's suspicion of DUI. And shout out to, I'm going to get his name right, Jason Lusk, who wrote for Golf Week and documented it, because I wanted to get into all of these in their own, sort of separate context in discussion of this. But this is now the fourth time that this has happened, that Tiger Woods has been involved in a car accident of some sort. The first one, who does not remember it? Well, I don't remember it that well because I was 6, but I know about, obviously. November 27th, 2009, Tiger Woods crashed into a fire hydrant in his neighbor's yard early in the morning of his private golf community in Islesworth, near Orlando, day after Thanksgiving. Of course, his then wife was reported to have pulled Woods from the vehicle. He was driving with Woods, and Woods was transported to a local hospital, released later that morning. No charges. We know about that situation. 2017, I remember this one pretty distinctly. May 27, 2017, Tiger Woods passed out around 3 a.m. while driving on the Military Trail, a major road in the Palm Beach Gardens. The driver's side of his Mercedes was damaged. He was arrested and found to have prescription drugs and marijuana in his system. Woods later pleaded guilty to reckless driving and agreed to a plea deal that kept him out of jail. Police dropped the charges of driving under the influence. Woods entered a diversion program and spent a year on probation, had to submit on drug testing, and was ordered to avoid alcohol. And then 5 years ago, February 23rd, 2021, Tiger Woods was involved in a single vehicle accident in Rancho Palos Verde in California. The vehicle he was driving drifted left across the median, struck a sign, then drifted back to the right and across a road in a curve. The SUV then rolled down a steep embankment and flipped onto its side. Woods was pulled from the vehicle by rescue crews. LAPD later said that the crash was caused by excessive speed. Woods was traveling 87 miles an hour in a 45-mile-an-hour zone, and the inability to navigate the curve. He required surgery to serious injuries on his leg after the crash. Investigators did not seek a warrant for blood tests because they said there was no evidence of impairment or intoxication. No charges were filed, and the crash was ruled an accident. So, and now you get to this situation where he has been arrested on suspicion of DUI. Now, again, this is a brand new story. Plenty more is going to come out. We're just telling you what we know in the immediate. There was a press conference about an hour ago. We're doing the show at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific live. There was the press conference around 5 Eastern. And it sounds like this situation where he was probably under some sort of, he had something in the system that wasn't supposed to be there. And so, listen, if at this point, I mean, we're in 4 accidents now, not all of them being related to a foreign substance. At least 2 of them were. We know for sure 2017 and today. I think the main thing is when you are continually, and listen, we know that there are folks out there, we know this, that deal with substance abuse problems. It's been a problem in this country for far too long. And so, of course, there's empathy that comes with that. But there also is an element of, if you're constantly putting yourself and others in danger, it's one thing for you to be in a position where you're driving drunk and it's only putting your life in danger. If you're on the road, you're putting other people's lives at risk at some point, some level of precaution has to be taken there. And so, listen, from a legal perspective, far from qualified to speak on that. I have to imagine some of this would involve, at least a suspension of his driver's license, if not a full-out restriction. And I guess my question in all of this is, if indeed Tiger was under the influence, and there's a documented history of this, whether he's under influence or not, documented history of car accidents, man, what's this guy worth, $1 billion? He's the most iconic golfer maybe of all time. Buddy, hire a driver. If the rest of us can, if we're not able to drive or whatever, we can, hail a cab or put an Uber into our phones. Like, you think Tiger Woods, of all people, would be able to want and have control over that, to not put himself in these positions. It's kind of like not apples to oranges, but remember when the whole situation was going on a few years ago with Ja Morant, and Ja was when he was playing with guns on social media and what have you. And I think I remember saying at the time, like, man, Ja, if you feel so at danger, and Memphis is not a safe city, we've discussed that in this show, but if you feel so unsafe in that city or whatever, hire security. Like all of these NBA players, like Steph Curry, shout out to, I think his name's Yusuf. Shout out to him. He's been Steph Curry's bodyguard for years. I saw a video of Steph Curry at Costco yesterday. Everybody's following him. They got their phones out. Right next to him, who is it? Yusuf. And so, like, I've never understood. Listen, there's people that are poor. There are people that are rich that deal with substance abuse problems. Like that. That's not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about there are tangible ways that you can avoid putting yourself and others at risk, especially when you are, again, a billionaire, that you won't put into place. Is it an element of, again, I don't want to do so much psychoanalysis here, but is some of this, man, I'm Tiger Woods. Now, I'm maybe the greatest golfer of all time. I'm on the Mount Rushmore of athletes in the 21st century. It's like me, Michael Phelps, Tom Brady, and debate between LeBron James and Serena Williams. Like those are the big four of the 21st century. Simone Biles is the case too. Like I guess there's a certain element of feeling untouchable, whatever it is. But most important thing, thank God, it sounds like, based on the reports we're hearing right now, that no serious injuries, no one's life was in danger. No one's life was in danger at the time of the accident, I should say. And so we'll see how this continues to play out. But again, we have a documented history of this. Like when you hear Tiger's in an accident, you're like, is he okay? Is everyone else okay? You find out that's the case. And then you see that there's potential substance abuse problems. You're like, oh my gosh, we're doing this again? Every 5 years, this is a thing. 2009, 2017, 2021, and now today. So it's really, really unfortunate. And I have to imagine he's not going to be competing in Augusta after this for medical reasons, for legal reasons. I don't know. So we'll continue to keep you updated on the story as news continues to break, but really, really unfortunate. And so hoping and praying for everybody involved, because it sucks. There's no two ways about it. So obviously not the way I was planning to lead off the show, but let's shift to what I was planning to lead the show off with, is Tom Brady. I saw this story yesterday, and I'll be honest, as a football fan, as a Tom Brady fan, it made me smile. So Tom Brady was talking to, I think it was CNBC, Alex Sherman, telling Alex Sherman of CNBC that, this is his exact quote, I actually have inquired about the idea of coming back to play football, and the NFL, don't like that idea very much. We explored a lot of different things, and I'm very happily retired. Let me just say that too. He also discussed the idea of him, playing the flag football, game last Saturday when he was playing Team USA. He was one of the quarterbacks of the team. And he said, like, if nothing else, it just reaffirmed that I'm happy in retirement. And I'll be honest, I don't doubt that. Like, Tom got a lot of off-field opportunities. We know this. We know obviously about his 10-year, $300 million contract at Fox, of which, by the way, and I've talked about in the show, especially last season, I thought he was a fine broadcaster his first year. I thought year two, Tom took a gigantic leap, which makes all the sense in the world because you're talking about maybe the hardest working athlete of all time. No surprise that he got better at his job. And so, like, Tom's got nothing but opportunities. It made me smile because this is what the elite of the elite, the legends of the legends, the Mount Rushmore athletes and Mount Rushmore people have in common, is just this unquenchable thirst to compete at whatever the field is. And For Tom, like when you see videos, I remember distinctly watching one. I think it was before like a Cowboys-Eagles game when he was on the field at Jerry World throwing passes to A.J. Brown of the Eagles. It's like, this guy, he's still, I mean, he's in a full suit, by the way, still throwing tight spirals to elite wide receivers. And then you see him at the flag football game last week. Well, now we know flag football versus NFL football. No disrespect to flag football players. I officiated the sport. There's some good athletes out there. But the NFL, you're hitting guys at 100 miles an hour. We get that. But seeing him move out there, he's moving, he's spry. There's still a little bit of velocity in that football that the touchdown he threw to Stephon Diggs on Saturday. Is like, Tom got one more in him. And so, listen, based on NFL rules, because he's now, obviously, as we know, it has a stake in the Vegas Raiders, it would be very, very difficult, if not impossible, for him to be able to come back without giving up his ownership in the Raiders, which, frankly, I think would be a very, very dumb thing to do. You got a stake in a stake in ownership of an NFL franchise. By the way, an NFL franchise that I think is on their way back up with the fact they're going to have Fernando Mendoza. They've got young talent, Brock Bowers, Ashton Genty. Looks like Max Crosby isn't going anywhere. I really like Kubiak as their coach. Like, I honestly think, as brutal as that division is, Vegas has a bright future in the next few years ahead. I think it'd be a mistake for Tom Brady to turn his back on that. And so you have that component onto it. But then you look at the other side of that coin, and she's like, we can show you what Tom Brady was his final year in the league, and he was far from the best quarterback, but wasn't bad. 45 years old back in 2022 at the Bucs. They were 8-9. They had a losing record, and then they got pounded by the Cowboys in the wild card game. But 45 years old, 25 touchdown, 9 picks, not terrible. 4,600 yards, 66% completion percentage, 90 pass rating, 54 QBR, and he led 4 game-winning drives that season. Now, part of the reason the yards are as high as they are, like 4,600 yards, that's hard for guys to get nowadays. Now, some of that is some defensive adjustments that have been made in the last half decade or so, what have you, some of which the Tampa Bay Bucs actually pioneered to a certain degree. Todd Bowles in that Tampa defense back in 2020. But a lot of that was, if you remember, back in 2022, Tampa Bay had no run game to speak of. I know they had Leonard Fournette. They had a couple. I think they might have had like a running back from Vanderbilt, if I remember correctly. Like, they could not run the football to save their lives. They had offensive line injuries. And because they were, A, trailing in a bunch of games, as evidenced by their 8-9 record, and B, they couldn't run the football, Tom was having to drop back and throw 40 and sometimes 50 times a game. I think his last game against Dallas, he had like 60 attempts. He actually led the league in completions his final year in the league. Whereas if he had been in San Francisco, for example, with McCaffrey and Kyle Shanahan calling plays and a lot of play action, a lot of get the ball to your hands quickly, like we've seen with Garoppolo and Brock Purdy, Tom's probably a lot more successful. Matter of fact, I'm almost certain he's a lot more successful. But I guess the question is, 32 starting quarterbacks in the NFL. Are you telling me that Tom couldn't be the 25th best? Lower on the totem pole. Somewhere in that, what is a good example? Okay. Somewhere in the Justin Fields category. Justin Fields, who started a majority of the games for the Jets last season. Now, obviously very, very different players, but could he be in that bottom quarter of NFL starters? Because I'll tell you right now, I absolutely believe he'd be in the top quarter of NFL backups. You're telling me Tom Brady isn't as good as, Andy Dalton, Snoop Huntley, Cooper Rush? Like, he's not as good as those guys? Mitch Trubisky? Mason Rudolph? I could see it. Absolutely. Again, tiny sample size, and let's be honest, honestly, a different sport. Flag football moved well, ball had velocity on it. And the thing is, too, listen, I've talked about this with Aaron Rodgers, that so many people just get, and maybe I'm doing this with Brady now, but so many people just fall in the illusion like, God, he's old. Not the same player, but dear God, he throws a beautiful ball. I'd say Dan Marino can probably still throw a perfect spiral. I'd say Troy Aikman probably can. Like, the guys that were playing in the 80s and 90s, Joe Montana, can't get the same velocity on it that they used to, but they could still probably toss the pigskin around pretty good. Like, Tom will be able to throw the football for another 15, 20 years. We're like, oh, I bet old Tom could suit up one more time, but buckle that chin strap, here we go. So if we created like the perfect scenario in the NFL, there's no perfect rosters. We understand that. If you put Tom Brady, who's an offense that we consider like kind of flawless, kind of perfect, perfectly constructed, what have you. I think I have two teams. And I'll be honest, right now, and we got to see the draft plays out. I do not make my NFL predictions until September, just for the record. Nothing is set in stone until that preseason show in September. That said, the Bears last year and the Rams, I think those are going to be the teams that we see in the NFC Championship game. I may change my pick more for September, but that's what my gut tells me with respect to the defending champion Seahawks. You look at the Rams. Holy cow. O-line's not amazing, but if they upgrade in the draft, it'll be fine. You've got 2 elite wide receivers. The Puka situation pending. We'll see what happens with that. They might add some depth at tight end in the draft. Good running game that they've got. Sean McVay calling plays. Tom wouldn't put up Matt Stafford numbers. That would be disrespectful to Stafford. Could he be... Who's Matt Stafford's backup? Tom's old backup, Jimmy Garoppolo. Could he be as productive as Jimmy Garoppolo? Age 40, because the start of next season, Tom's going to be 49 years old. You're telling me Tom couldn't be, hey, stationary, pocket guy, get out of your hands quickly? Sure he could. I absolutely believe he could. You know, if somebody who's used to moving around, this is part of why Aaron Rodgers has declined so drastically in such a short amount of time is Aaron, part of what made him so amazing was kind of the ability. He could obviously make throws from the pocket, but to move in and out of the pocket, make off-platform throws, that was never Tom. Matter of fact, it was a big reason that a lot of folks thought, hey, Rodgers, that guy's better than Brady. It's a crime that Rodgers will retire with more MVPs than Tom. Different discussion for a different day. It was the aesthetic. It was the, God, look at the throws he can make. Tom couldn't make the, holy cow, how did he fit it in there with, off platform? That wasn't his game. He was the greatest pocket quarterback ever. He's the greatest quarterback ever, obviously, but the greatest pocket quarterback ever. The greatest quarterback at sensing pressure from his blind side. Greatest quarterback. He never got enough credit for this, and I never understood why. Maybe because of the 40-yard dash and the bad combine tape. I don't know. But his ability to just maneuver in and out of the pocket, he was really shifty. It was kind of hard to bring down to a certain degree for somebody who wasn't going to take off and beat you with his legs. If you gave him a clean pocket on a pretty consistent basis, gave him some good weapons, again, we're asking for almost a unrealistically perfect roster. We sure he couldn't be decent? We sure he couldn't go out there and win some games? I don't know. I've seen a lot of backups in the NFL come in and go on winning streaks. I've seen Teddy Bridgewater and Cooper Rush go on winning streaks. I mean, it's not out of the question. So, I mean, listen, I saw Mac Jones. It looked like a starter under Kyle Shanahan. Mac Jones looked like he didn't belong in the league with New England and Jacksonville. So, put Tom with San Francisco, the Rams, Chicago, like one of these brilliant offensive coaches, good O-line. The Niners don't have the best O-line, so that might not be ideal for Brady. But running game, I'm not saying he'd lead him to his 8th Super Bowl championship. I am saying I think he's a better option than a lot of guys. I'll just tell you right now. We're far from a perfect offensive system. But if the Steelers are intent on bringing an old veteran quarterback in, I've said if they're intent on doing that, then just bring in Kirk Cousins and call it a day. At least he's slightly less of a player than Rodgers and 15 times the teammate. Call Tom. Honestly, I'm okay rooting for Tom Brady for a year. Obviously, he's got a history of kind of owning the Steelers, so it'd be kind of weird if he played for him, but I don't know. Just an idea. It's almost certainly not going to happen, but the fact that Tom publicly went on television and said, yeah, I talked to the NFL about it. They weren't crazy about the idea. I thought it was interesting. I think speaks to all of our greatest athletes. There's just they got to be doing something in a competitive field. They got to. I mean, even God rest his soul, the late great Kobe Bryant. It was when Kobe first retired in 2016. I should say first retired. He only had one retirement. It wasn't Brett Favre or Michael Jordan or something. When Kobe retired in 2016, it was kind of like this was a dogged. I mean, just cut your chest open, rip your heart out type of competitor. What's he going to do when he doesn't have basketball anymore? And the answer is, I'm going to be a great author, and I'm going to be an Oscar-winning. I'm going to win an Oscar for Dear Basketball, and I'm going to be a great coach with the Mamba Academy. I'm going to do all these things. I think he had was Body Armor Kobe Bryant's sports drink that he was involved with, and had he not died tragically, he would have likely left Nike and then created his own shoe brand to maybe rival his idol, Michael Jordan. Like, he's like, Kobe's mindset was, I'm just going to enter all these other competitive fields. And not to drag this out too long before we get to our March Madness segment, but I heard Joe Buck talk about this. He's obviously been doing games with Troy Aikman for 25 years or so. Aikman retired in 2001, I think it was 2001. And Joe talked about that for, watching Troy. It's weird. It was weird to see him go to a game, prep for a game, watch film, and there's no scoreboard for him to go off of for himself. Buck made a joke like, you don't leave the booth and like, hey, great win on the broadcast. Hope we can go to 2-0 next week. Like, it's not how it works. It's a whole different industry. Romo, Brady, Collinsworth. Collinsworth wasn't a quarterback. The mic goes out occasionally. I apologize. A lot of these quarterbacks, the traits that made them great quarterbacks and great students of the game have been what's made them great broadcasters, the ability to see what's going on from a bird's eye view, but there's no competition there. And so for Tom, it's probably why he played in the flag football game. It's probably why we don't know when he floated this to the NFL. It had to have been pretty recent because he's only been a co-owner of the Raiders for a couple of years. So it probably happened sometime between 2024 and now. I don't know. It's something. It's noteworthy. I mean, he did unretire a first time. Now, that was kind of weird and clunky, and there was conflicting reports. And I remember, his dad denied when the first retirement came out. His dad said, no, he didn't retire. And then a few days later, it's like, no, he actually did retire. And then he came back like a month and a half later. Like, that was a weird situation that I remember talking about on the show. Listen, I'll put it at a 5% chance Tom comes back. So overwhelmingly unlikely. I would be floored if it happened. I wouldn't be, man, I never saw this coming. I didn't think there was a chance in. This is Tom Brady we're talking about. If Phillip Rivers can come back, now Phillip Rivers, again, wasn't the part owner of an NFL team, but Phillip Rivers came out and looked okay. Looked, I think, better than we all thought he would. I remember that Monday night game he had against San Francisco. It's like, oh, Phil looks okay out here. So we'll see. All right, let's shift to March Madness. Again, shorter show. We're going to take a break after this. I'm looking at women's March Madness, and shocker, UConn is destroying UNC. They're up 15. They're not destroying them, but they should win comfortably. On the men's side of the bracket. So Sweet 16 began last night, and right off the bat, just two unbelievable finishes. You got Purdue beating Texas 79-77. It's looking like for a while, like, holy crap, Texas may pull this thing off. 11 seed, first 4 team might be going the Elite 8. Like some shades of, remember that UCLA team in 2021 that was a first 4 team and came that close to beating undefeated Gonzaga, going to the national championship. I think, I remember that team. They had like Johnny Juzang and the guy who plays for the Heat. I'm forgetting his name right now. Oh my gosh. Anyways, just a really, really good team. Mick Cronin was the coach. And Purdue gets a tip in to win the game. Just an unbelievable finish. And then you had Iowa, who's at this point, I guess, is the last pseudo-Cinderella team. There's no double-digit seeds left. Iowa's basically the only Cinderella team left. They beat Nebraska. Nebraska got a situation where they've got 4 guys on the court and a huge possession. Like, that was odd. Coach took a lot of flack after the game, understandably so. I know, was it Alabama had a very similar situation a couple months ago. They're playing Georgia. I think they actually got a stop on the play. They had 4 guys on the court defending Georgia. Georgia didn't seem to be taking advantage of it. They ran a really weird offensive set. I think the ball got knocked into the backcourt or something. Like, it was kind of a mess. But not the first time we've seen that this year in major college basketball. But Iowa advancing. They're going to be playing Illinois, who beat Houston last night. And so down goes half of my Final Four bracket. I had Virginia go in the Final Four. Very happy I was wrong because my Vols beat them. And I also had Houston going to the Final Four rematch with Duke. I thought Duke would get revenge this year. Well, Houston's out. And so that's that. Kudos to Illinois. And then Arizona just clobbered Arkansas. Listen, Arizona, I feel like Duke was the trendy pick. I went with Duke just because I think Shire's a great coach. I get that young teams don't tend to win championships, but it feels like there's an element of, it's Duke. They haven't won a title in 11 years. Feels like they're kind of due. There was a stretch for UConn women's basketball. I think they went from 2016 to, I think last year, I think it was 2016 to 2025, if I'm not mistaken, where they didn't win a national championship, and then they finally broke through, and now UConn's probably going to do it again this year. Like, great programs, great coaches. Eventually, the bill comes due, and you come through. But Arizona, I feel like, by the college basketball whizzes, they're like, yeah, that's the consistently best team in the country this year. So they're going to the Elite Eight. Again, they dominated Arkansas last night. They're going to be taking on Purdue. That should be a great game tomorrow. What time is that game tip off? A little before 9 o'clock Eastern Standard Time tomorrow night in the Elite Eight. Tonight in the Elite Eight, you got St. John's versus Duke, which is outside of Tennessee, because it's my beloved Vols, outside of Tennessee and Iowa State. I cannot wait to watch this game. You got Duke, who's the pick by many, including myself, to win the Natty. You got St. John's, who wins on a buzzer beater last week. You got Rick Pitino. Can he be able to lead this group of players to a national championship with this unbelievable defense? They can't shoot for you know what, but they will defend you like nobody's business. That'll be a fun game. Great coaching matchup. You got Alabama versus Michigan. I got Michigan winning that game. Alabama's just been kind of a weird, at times inconsistent, at times discombobulated mess. So I do have Michigan winning that game. They're 9.5-point favorites. Michigan State, UConn's going to be good. But you got two excellent coaches, Danny Hurley, Tom Izzo. I'm going to go with Michigan State to win this game. I think the Spartans advance. And then finally, of course, Tennessee and Iowa State. So, look, I'll be honest. I did not have my Vols going to the Sweet 16 before the tournament. I thought Virginia would clip us in round 2, and there were points in that game. Looks like they were going to. Kudos to Nate Ament and Jacoby Gillespie for bringing the Big Orange home. But this is a much tougher challenge. The Big 12 was, in men's college basketball, easily the best conference in the country this year, just in terms of top-level talent. They might very well have the top 2 picks potentially in this year's draft. So it was unbelievable. And Iowa State was one of those teams who showed up and showed out. The line has moved a lot. It initially opened. I remember I looked at my phone. The line initially opened Iowa State minus 2.5. It got as high yesterday as Iowa State minus 4.5. It's come down in between to Iowa State minus 3.5. Look, 7-game series, heck, 5-game series. That's kind of what I love about the NBA is, with the exception of injuries, knock on wood, the best team generally wins. You got to beat a team 4 times. If you do that, you're probably the better team. March Madness, part of what makes it great, every game's game 7, every game's elimination game. And so I'm riding, and I may die tonight, but I'm riding and dying with my Vols in this game against Iowa State. I think it is huge. Listen, Nate Ament, who's going to be a potential lottery pick in this year's draft, who has some, I don't think he's quite the upside of this player I'm about to mention that Rick Barnes happened to coach in the past, but you see the physical resemblance to a certain degree. Nate Ament has a Kevin Durant type of build. Now, again, doesn't move like KD, doesn't shoot like KD, although he can shoot the basketball. And then defensively, I think he's probably a little bit better than KD was in his 1 year at Texas. But Nate Ament has been dealing with an ankle and a knee injury for about a month now. He's missed games here and there. First game of Tennessee's run the tournament, he didn't score a single point. And so it's like, gosh, is he going to, and my mindset was, man, Tennessee kind of cruised to a win with Nate Ament doing nothing. And then, of course, he had some huge free throws late in that game against Virginia. So I think the Vols haven't played since Sunday, almost a week's rest. That knee's got to feel much better. The ankle, there's the element of Sweet 16. Jacoby Gillespie showed an ability to hit the big shots when it matters. Rick Barnes, opportunity to go to back-to-back Elite Eights. I'm going with Tennessee. I'll be honest, I'm nervous about this one tonight. I really, really am. I'm nervous. But at the end of the day, I think the Vols get it done. Tennessee would play either Michigan or Alabama. I'll be honest, I think Michigan probably gets us in the Elite Eight. I think that likely happens, so I'm kind of pulling for Alabama tonight because Tennessee did lose a game to Alabama at home that they really shouldn't have, kind of came apart in the last 2 minutes. Tennessee has struggled at times in clutch games, which is why Sunday's game against Virginia was a very good thing to see. I think we're getting a close one tonight. Defense wins the day. Vols win this one. I'm going to say by 3 over the Iowa State Cyclones. It's going to be a battle. And I don't feel great about a matchup with Michigan. I think Michigan is, at worst, the 3rd best team in the tournament. I even saw the odds from ESPN. I think they said Tennessee has like the second to last best odds to win the national championship among the teams that are left. I think only Alabama was lower than them. Hey, defy the odds. That's what March Madness is great, right? All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, my oh my, this is going to be tough. So, as some of you have to know, I'm not going to be doing a show next week and be taking the week off. I'll continue to put out content. So stay attuned to the YouTube channel and Instagram, TikTok. We'll be putting out content over the course of the next 10 days up until my next show, which will be the day of the men's national championship. I'm sure we'll be reacting to the women's national championship, men's natty. We'll be talking about as well as some NBA storylines, draft, all of it. But over the course of the last month and a half, I have reviewed Love Story, John F. Kennedy Jr. and Carolyn Bessette. Well, given that we're not doing a show Monday, I figured season finale aired last night. We're going to review it in just 1 minute. And it was, you'll have to stay tuned until after the break. I had very few words after it was over, but I'll have some for you in just 1 minute on Carving Up Live. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Carving Up Live. I appreciate everybody stopping by on a Friday. Again, as I said before the break, no carving it up next week. Going to take the week off, but I'll be back. I guess, what will that be? April 5th, I think that is? April 5th? April 6th, I apologize. April 6th, which is day after Easter. It'll also be the day of the men's college basketball natty. We'll have reaction, of course, to the women's natty as well, so that should be fun. And so first order of business there. Second order of business, we do all every show. Check out our Carving It Up merchandise. Scan the QR code on the top left corner screen. By the way, the website that I use to stream my show, StreamYard, which a lot of content creators use, a little nice rebranding, which I like. I'm gonna miss the green duck. A blue duck is a little odd, but whatever. It's a fresh look for StreamYard. So shout out to them. Let's check out the QR code, top left corner of your screen. You can get some Carving Up merch. We got hats, we got t-shirts, we got hoodies, and what have you. Given the fact that we're in spring, you probably need both because the weather is quite unpredictable. Yesterday it was like 80 degrees where I'm at. Tomorrow it's gonna be like 50 is the high. So it's all over the place. So get some Carving Up merch. We appreciate it if you rep the show. Also, check out our amazing content creators on the grid there much as well. Barry Grant Jr. with the All Even Podcast, which, by the way, Barry, if you're watching, buddy, you know I love you. And I know you love your Mets. And so does my guy Alfred Parsar Jr., who does a great Mets podcast, Metropolitan Report. Barry's got a new Mets podcast as well. I mean, if you follow Barry on Twitter, folks, if you follow this man on Twitter, I mean, I think the Mets are just going to win the World Series. Like, it's 162-0. They're cruising through the playoffs. Like, it's over. I mean, my goodness. Listen, I know they annihilated Paul Skeens yesterday, and that was shocking. I'll be honest. The fact this man couldn't even get out of the first inning was stunning. Best pitcher in baseball. Mets were all over him. That said, slow your horses just a little bit. Although my Red Sox did win yesterday over the Reds. That was nice to see. But seriously, check out our Grid Network content creators. They got merch as well. All Even Podcasts, Metropolitan Report, Cowboys, Cam Fan. What else? We got Mike and Josh. Great pods on the Grid Network. Saturday Morning Tailgate, which should be back for season 2 this fall. So very, very excited about all those things. Okay. So let me take a drink of water first, because this is gonna be tough. And I'll be honest, man. I don't know how this is gonna go for the next 15 minutes or so, but we're gonna do our best. So, over the course of the last month and a half, we've been doing reviews on this show of the hit FX series. Matter of fact, I think it's the most watched. I saw the other day, the most watched FX series ever. Love Story, John F. Kennedy Jr. and Carolyn Bessette. Two very well-known people, of course, in the 90s. Son of the 35th President of the United States. His wife, her story is told in this as well. And we've been reviewing each and every episode. And I found it compelling television. I found it, by and large, as somebody who wasn't terribly familiar with either of their stories, because I'm very much into presidential history. the most I know about presidential kids, I'll be honest, John Quincy Adams and George W. Bush, because those are the only sons of presidents to become presidents in their own right. But in reading and just learning more information about both of these individuals, it would appear, generally speaking, some would disagree, and I understand why, it would appear that the show was relatively consistent with the facts. Of course, they dramatize it, they change a few things here and there, but pretty consistent to the facts. Well, we of course know, let me say this on the front end, nothing but spoilers ahead, as we do on this show, on the reviews of this series. We know it ends up happening to both of them, as well as her sister, Lauren. Episode 9, the finale of the show, aired last night on FX and then came out technically today, I guess, at midnight on Hulu and Disney+. So here we go. My review of episode 9, which was left me, I think, all of America watching pretty speechless. First of all, before I even get into the episode, if you watched or saw interviews or read interviews with any of the cast, they had seen the first 8 episodes. Obviously, they know what they filmed. Some stuff's cut out. They don't know how it's going to be edited. But Ryan Murphy Productions did not give them anything about episode 9, how it would look and what have you, what scenes they'd include. And so the very cast in the show was as in the dark about it as the rest of us were. So the episode begins with John and Carolyn, who are in marriage counseling. We know the end of episode 8. They have this big fight. I think they said the scene lasted like 15 to 17 minutes. It was a brilliant job by both actors, as I talked about on Monday. He obviously walks out. They're in marriage counseling. There's, some bickering, some back and forth going on. Of course, they're dealing with some issues. And the marriage counselor, once they're finished, she's like, I suggest a trial separation. You guys should spend at least a month apart. It may be 2. And both of them are like, what? They go from arguing with each other to argue with the marriage counselor, which I don't know if that was an intentional tactic on her part to be like, oh, okay, so maybe they're not as distant as they once thought. And so the session goes poorly, at least through the couple's eyes. They end up going to like a bar and talking about it. And John, if I got my notes right here, John actually talks about how, because he's been staying at a hotel nearby. She's been living at their Tribeca loft. And he talks about how, whenever I'm by myself, I only think about the good times. I don't think about the fights and what have you. And so they kind of reminisce on some good memories of theirs. And when it's all said and done, they end up going back to their apartment and getting it off, you know what I mean? And I almost felt like watching that. It felt like they were, because they've been distant for a minute now. We don't know how long specifically. We know that their, I guess, soft separation that begins in episode 8 and then continue episode 9. We know it happened within the year 1999. But it almost felt like a rebellion against the marriage counselor. Like, no, screw you. We're going to go on the other side of the spectrum on this. Which, is that healthy? You be the judge of that. So the next morning, he's going to like a lunch or something. I think it has to do with George Magazine. And she's like, hey, you want to talk about yesterday and all of it? And he says he's trying to like convince her to go to a George gala. And she's like, no, I really don't want to go. And he said, so I guess that means Rory's wedding is off the table. Rory Kennedy, his cousin. And she's like, you don't get it. Just because, or I don't want to show up to things acting like everything's fine when it's not. So it's like, okay, we're probably back to square one. Okay. And so John then meets with Caroline Kennedy, his sister, of course, at a reservoir that's named after their mother. And it's so funny. The first words out of Caroline's mouth in the scene is, you look terrible. Listen, I have a sister. That's how sibling banter goes. That's the name of the game. But of course, there's always love. And he's lamenting to her about how it's like she won't forgive me for ruining her life, for taking her anonymity and all of it, and she's not the same person, and da-da-da. And Caroline, who throughout the show, and I've discussed this, has been very, not outright cruel or anything towards Carolyn, but very standoffish. There's obviously a very tense scene in the middle of episode 7 between the two, and they don't have the greatest relationship. But Caroline kind of takes up for Carolyn, is giving her younger brother some, older sister advice. And she says, we don't have the exact quotes here, but she says that, you dated women for all these years that were basically willing to let you, in other words, be the main character of the story, to let you be the shining star in the relationship, and they just be in the background because they were just happy to be with John F. Kennedy Jr. And she said none of them stuck. And then you meet one who's not going to just bend over backwards because, oh my gosh, John F. Kennedy Jr. She's like, no, I really like you. You're just John to me. You're not son of the 35th president of the United States and heir to the Kennedy throne. And you ended up getting married to that one. You fell in love with her and you got married. So obviously, she's like, don't complain about the qualities that made you fall in love with this person. And let me rephrase that. Don't complain about the things you fell in love with, because you would not be at this point in the relationship, that you would not have lasted this long if you didn't see those qualities right off the bat. And I remember discussing when I was talking about episodes 1 through 3, and was that this is so bizarre. John is chasing Carolyn. It was very, very weird. It was very foreign to John, which is, again, what attracted him to her. One of the many things that attracted him to her. Well, simultaneously, I imagine, Carolyn is meeting with her sister, Lauren. And Lauren informs her that, obviously, okay, Rory Kennedy's wedding this weekend, and John's going to drop me off at Martha's Vineyard. And she kind of gives her big sister advice. She was Carolyn's older sister. She also had a twin, Lisa. And she talks about how, you can't, I know you guys have had problems, but you can't just cling to the past if you want to make a better future for the two of you. And so the next scene, you see Carolyn meet John at the George Magazine Gala, which what the two actors wore in that scene is what John and Carolyn actually did, wear in real life. I think it was actually like a John F. Kennedy Jr., Paul Newman, like dual charity event, or not dual, but a joint charity event that was going on. So you have that. And she kind of tells him, like, he's surprised that she's there. And she's like, I want to make this work. And I want to show you that, I'm here for you, whatever. So it's like, oh, that's great to see. Well, the next day she shows up to their apartment and she sees these flowers with a note inside of their loft. And we saw this in the preview, in the trailer for episode 9. She meets him at the Indian restaurant where they had their first date back in episode 1. And there's even some, like back and forth going on, like them exchanging lines that they said on their first date, which was cool. And there's a part where, in reference to that first date, when he says, or she says, what I remember from that date? And after referencing his stolen bike, she says, when you said, everyone feels like they've got like a sign over their head. And for me, I feel like I've got the sign over my head that says the hunk flunks, because that was the time that he failed his bar exam the second time. And that was the headline in all the newspapers. And there's, of course, he felt bad about that. And he said, okay, what's your sign? And if she didn't tell him on the first date, and he said, you still haven't told me what that said, what your proverbial sign says. And she said, if I have this here, she said, please handle with care, not as tough as she looks. She said, if I had made myself vulnerable in that moment, jig is up. And she said, which means you wouldn't have had a reason to stay. And so there's this very kind of tender and vulnerable moment between these two where he says, hey, you're the first priority in my life. I'm going to reorganize everything around that. And so then they walk home, and he mentions, like, I'll be back on Sunday after Rory's wedding and we can go on a trip or something. And she's like, oh, shoot, I forgot about Rory's wedding. He's like, no, it's fine. You don't have to go to that. She's like, no, I want to go. I miss dancing with you. And they dance for a little bit outside, and they go their separate ways. She goes to the loft. He goes back to the hotel. And this is when you knew, like, okay, this is about to take a turn for the worst. You see the next day, Carolyn in their loft, and she's in the same clothes that she wore in the first scene of episode 1 when she approaches her sister and husband on the tarmac. It's like, okay, here it's about to happen. And so there's some replays of some scenes that happen in episode 1 just to get everybody caught up to speed. Well, then you cut to the plane. And it's just, watching this, I went back and watched the episode to take some notes on this, because that's what I did for every episode, because I want to experience it the first time and then see if I catch some things that I didn't catch on the first viewing. I went back and looked. The scene is about 4 minutes long of them in the plane. Watching it, it felt like it was 40. It's just this unending dread. Like, they're about to die. Like that's what's going to happen. And so you have that, and right at the beginning of the scene, she like moves up in the cockpit to sit next to her husband, and slowly but surely over time, you start to see from their vantage point in the plane, the visibility is getting worse and worse. They were flying. You realize they were supposed to take off around 6. They actually took off, I think, at 8:39. So they're flying in the dark. There's no instructor. Again, this whole thing was so darn preventable. Either fly the next day or fly that night with the instructor. It was, and so you see, and apparently this is what flying experts have said in real life about this event, that it gets to a point where the water and the sky look the same. Like you are just flying into a dark blue abyss. You don't know where you're at. It was because it was dark. It was foggy. You don't know what's going on. And so you try to course correct. And you see, God knows I'm no flying expert, but you're seeing red lights flash and some alarms go off. And you just see the progressive panic in his face. Again, it makes your stomach turn watching the scene, honestly, for the first time. Even the second viewing did it. And you see like Lauren in the back, and she's like got her eyes closed. You imagine like praying, I'm sure. And it was just, we don't know if this happened in real life, of course, but it was remarkable to see Carolyn comforting John in that moment. There's a point where he says, you need to go in the back. Basically, I think you should go back to your seat. She's like, no, I want to be here with you. You've got this. And she even uses the line that she used multiple times throughout the series when he's going through a time of crisis. She's like, breathe, John, breathe, breathe. And it's the last shot of Lauren is her praying. The last shot of Karen, it looks like she says like a short prayer. And then the last shot of John, you just see like the reflections of the red lights in his face and the panic, and it fades to black. And so, and I think it went to commercial right after that on FX. It was obviously devastating to watch, because you think, because these are real people. And I found a lot of parallels to this and the crash that killed Kobe Bryant, his daughter, and 7 others in Calabasas back in 2020. It was a helicopter crash, not a plane crash, but where it's not only where there's so many circumstances, there was fog, where it felt like it could have been preventable, but there was also an element of, what's going through the minds of these people? What's going through the minds of the pilots when this is going on? Because some form of, as far as I understand, vertigo played factor in the crash. And it's horrifying to watch. Horrifying. And so we cut to Caroline and her husband, Ed. I hope I'm getting this right. I think they were in like Idaho. They weren't going to attend the wedding. And they get a knock on the door from some local officers, and they say, your brother's plane is missing. And then you cut to Anne Freeman, Carolyn and Lauren's mom, and she's in bed, and she gets a call. I think she got the call from Anthony Radswell's wife, that the plane's missing. And then you cut back, and Caroline is leaving the house. Caroline and Ed are leaving the house, and the breaking news alert comes on national television, and you're seeing all the reports. John F. Kennedy Jr., his wife, sister-in-law, they're missing. And I think at one point, Caroline just shuts off the TV when they keep reporting the news. Well, then a woman walks in. Senator Ted Kennedy sitting in the room. It's like Ted Kennedy, Ed Schlossberg, and Ethel Kennedy are sitting there watching, or we're watching the news reports. Woman walks in. Senator Kennedy, the president's on the phone. President Clinton takes the call. Mr. President, and you see just his face just sink. And I don't know if it was they've been pronounced dead, or this is now turned into a search as opposed to search and rescue, search and recovery mission. And there's a devastating scene involving Caroline Kennedy. She's in her kitchen. She's leaning over the sink, looking out the window. And she hears her husband walk in. And she says, please don't say anything. She's like, don't say a word. And she's saying in her breath, I'm not going to do this again. Will not do this again. And, he just slowly kind of approaches, trying to console her, and it's gutting. And I'll say this, I've given all of the actors to various degrees shout outs for how they've portrayed their characters in the show. Grace Gummer was, to me, one of the 2 stars. We'll get to the second. One of the 2 stars of this episode. Grace Gummer, who plays Caroline Kennedy. She's actually Meryl Streep's daughter, and she's Mark Runson's wife, which I didn't know until recently. So that's, dope power couple there. But her portrayal of Caroline in that moment was, I mean, I'll be honest. I'm not somebody, I'm really not, I don't know if this is a character flaw. Judge me if you will. I'm not somebody who tears up or cries very often during movies. Like there are exceptions, but by and large, I just, that's not my personality. I've never been that way. But that scene, among others, it moves you to tears. It's devastating. This woman has lost her father in a brutal, tragic way, in assassination. She also lost other members of her family, including her uncle, to assassination 5 years later. Her mom dies relatively young, in her early to mid 60s, of cancer. And then 5 years after that, her brother dies in a plane crash. And so then we go to, make sure I'm getting this right. So there's a meeting involving, I'm assuming, some lawyers. Ed Schlossberg is there. There's no Caroline Kennedy. And Anne Freeman walks in. And there's a very tense exchange between her and Ed, where she's very irritated. Like, why isn't Caroline here? Why isn't she here to basically, I guess, grieve in this manner, and I guess the legal manner that the rest of us are? And Ed's trying to, I guess, diffuse the situation and bring the temperature down. He keeps saying Carolyn. And she says, you keep saying her name. Constance Zimmer, who does an unbelievable job. She's the second star of this episode, playing Anne Freeman. She says, you keep saying her name, but may I remind you that I lost not 1, but 2 daughters in that plane crash that John was in that plane that John was piloting. Well, she goes to their apartment, to their Tribeca loft, John and Carolyn's Tribeca loft, and she finds the note that John left Caroline a few days prior to that when they went to meet at the Indian restaurant. And right after she reads it, who but Caroline Kennedy walks in. Fades to black. Go to the next scene where they're talking at the table. And while I try when I've reviewed each of these episodes to give, my interpretation of the one-on-one interactions or the scenes or what Ryan Murphy or Connor Hines are trying to tell us through, I will not be able to do the scene justice by just talking about what happened. For those of you who haven't watched the show, hey, whole series is on Disney Plus now. It's devastating. It's 2 people who have been through unimaginable loss. There's regret there. Just take my word for it. It is brilliant acting on the part of Grace Gummer as Caroline Kennedy and Constance Zimmer as Anne Freeman. The one thing I will say is by the end of it, because they're trying to decide what to do with their remains, and by the end of it, Caroline says, not that long ago, John expressed a desire to have his remains buried at sea. So you go to a scene involving Caroline and Ethel Kennedy. And it's to watch Ethel's development on the show is really interesting. So we first see her in episode 5 when John and Carolyn visit Hyannisport when Carolyn visits Hyannisport for the first time with John. And she essentially kind of hazes Carolyn in the Kennedy political discussions and current events. And Carolyn's like, what is it? Is this is this a cabinet meeting or is this a family dinner? What are we doing? And then I remember she had a conversation at the beginning of episode 6 with Carolyn where she kind of softens up, and just to see her in episode 9, and she's recalling when her parents died in a plane crash, which I didn't even know. Her parents died in a plane crash. She's like, oh my gosh. She said this. She said relatives from her husband's side of the family. Her husband himself was gunned down mercilessly in 1968. And she's kind of like in her own way, kind of consoling Caroline that, this is what we Kennedy women do. We're the strong people in this way. And you see the burial at sea, the family members scattered, John, Carolyn, and Lauren's ashes in the ocean off the coast of Martha's Vineyard. And the final scene of the show is the memorial service. And you see all of these people that you see throughout the show, obviously Caroline and Ed and Anthony Radswell, who himself would tragically pass about a month later due to his illness. You even see Calvin Klein in the episode, or in the funeral scene. And Anne Freeman goes up to eulogize her daughters. And she recites the poem called Death is Nothing at All. And throughout this monologue by Constance Zimmer, they're showing shots of her giving the speech. They're showing the holy water at the end of the service. And then they show, I'll be honest, this is what got me, is you see a shot on a beach of John and Carolyn kind of embracing, sitting on the beach, looking out over the ocean as this monologue ends. And there have been kind of two trains of thought as to what that scene means. Or really two. The more I think about it, I think it's the third option. The first is what could have been? Like, this is what it would have been, because by all accounts, it sounds like that these two were probably going to move from New York City to a more, remote part of, I imagine, the Northeast, to be relatively close to their families, but to give some sense of privacy and probably start a family at that point. So there's the what if factor. Maybe. But then my question is, where's Lauren in this scene? Of course, she passed too, and we can't forget her in all of this. The second thing is, and I initially thought it was this, is this like a representation of John and Carolyn in heaven? Which makes sense. They're both wearing white in the scene. So they're on this beautiful beach looking out over the water. Like, maybe it's that. I initially, I'd say for most of the time since the episode came out, that was my train of thought. And I actually think it's the third option, which is an unspoken callback to an exchange John and Carolyn had at their wedding in episode 6. When he's talking about the wedding, he says, I don't want it to end. And she says, everything ends. He says, not us. I think it was a representation of, these people are gone. They are not, no longer with us tragically in bodily form, but their love will endure forever. And that's the whole point of the story, is to tell the love story. And that love didn't die on July 16th, 1999. And so it was a sober end to a brilliant series. And I've said it multiple times for the last few weeks, but I think Sarah Pidgeon getting an Emmy for her portrayal of Carolyn feels almost inevitable at this point. If she doesn't get it, who the heck does? Respect all the other potential candidates out there, but I don't even think it's close. I think Paul Anthony Kelly has to be the overwhelming favorite to win in his category. And at this point, you have to consider somebody like Grace Gummer for Best Supporting Actress for this once the Emmys roll around in September. I think the nominees get announced in July, if I'm not mistaken. So it's going to be very interesting to see how that comes out. But it's incredible television. The show changes over time for a number of reasons. And listen, I didn't think the show was going to go an hour today, but a lot of it has been a review of episode 9. It's tragic. It's beautiful. It's moving. I wasn't born in the 90s. I was born in 03, but it's nostalgic. It's like, gosh, I wish I would have lived in the 90s, especially New York in the 90s, which people say was like, oh, that's peak New York City, man. But the number one thing that I want to do, besides give credit to everybody involved in this and for taking us on this journey, the number one thing that I want to do is, and I think all of America really had this sink in last night, these are 3 very, very real people who tragically lost their lives and had who knows what kind of future ahead of them, all in their own individual and collective ways. And so for John F. Kennedy Jr., Carolyn Bessette Kennedy, Lauren Bessette, tweeted this last night, but may they rest in peace. I will continue. I know it happened 27 years ago, but it's a refresher of what happened on that day and the aftermath of it. My prayers will continue to be with the Bessette family, the Kennedy family, friends, loved ones. And just a brilliant show. It truly, truly was. So shout out Ryan Murphy, who I know is controversial in his own right. I understand that. There's decent reason for that. But in this regard, he did a phenomenal job. Connor Hines, Sarah Pigeon, Paul Anthony Kelly, Sydney Lemon, who played Lauren Bessette, Grace Gummer, who played Caroline, Naomi Watts, who did an unbelievable job as Jackie Kennedy, and just up and down the list. Incredible cast, incredible story, incredibly well written, well shot. And it's A+ storytelling. And ultimately, that's Hollywood's job, is to tell a good story. And boy, did they do that. And so, with that, that is all the time we have for today's episode of Carving Up Live. Appreciate everybody for stopping by. As always, we're going to be taking next week off, Monday through Friday. But we'll be back on April the 6th, day after Easter, to talk end of March Madness, national championship on the men's and women's side. I'm sure NBA playoffs upcoming and all of those things. So appreciate everybody stopping by this Friday. We're going to continue to put out content. So check out YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, all of the above. All social media platforms. We'll be putting out short content, longer form content over the course of the next 10 days or so before I come back. But I appreciate everybody for stopping by on a Friday. Have a great weekend. Have a great next 10 days. I'll see y'all on April 6th. God bless y'all. Peace out. Thanks so much for watching the show on YouTube, and be sure to go click that big red subscribe button and check out the other clips and full shows from Carving It Up Live, as well as our other incredible content creators here on the Grid Network.